Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Reference Point. I'm your host, Dave Cokerhook. This evening, we're going to have a conversation with Barbara Smith. Her company is called Ask Barbara, and she's involved with the activity of helping individuals and families find assisted living for the seniors in their families. And Barbara, thank you for coming and joining me on Reference Point tonight. This is a fascinating topic. We've talked a little bit about it, but I really want to dig into it. But I just first want to say thank you for being here and coming all the way from Los Gatos.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Well, this is an interesting topic to me because it's an area that I think people in my generation haven't really thought a lot about unless and until there's an emergency situation,
right.
Something happens.
Right.
And I'm real curious to understand and get a feel for how it is that you actually got involved with doing this.
Sure.
How is it that you came about trying to help people with this assisted living type situation?
Right. Well, I think that the point you made is exactly right, that nobody ever researches this until they need it. And when they need it, it's really urgent, it's really important, and families feel like they're kind of making these big decisions without the proper information. So that's kind of where I come in. The way I got into this business was we needed to place my dad in assisted living 3 times between 2005 and 2007.
3 times?
Yeah. First, he had fallen down the stairs and hit his head pretty bad, and so we put him into, after the hospital and skilled nursing, we put him into a small board and care, and he recovered, came home, and, was just fine for probably about 9 months, and then he had another health event. He had a seizure, very big one, and we thought we were really going to lose him that day, but luckily we didn't. And we ended up putting him into a bigger facility the next time, and he did very well there. And then he became a fall risk after a while, and so we had to move him back to a smaller board and care. Okay. But that was why the three different situations in a short period of time.
How do the seniors respond to this kind of a thing of going someplace that's not the home they've known for so many years?
Sure. Well, I think that moving is stressful for anybody. Mm-hmm. But what I have found in my experience is people would move to assisted living if it could just be over with, if they could just be there immediately and not have to go through the stress of a move. What I've found is, in general, people will settle down after a few days to a week, and by the time they're there for 2 weeks, it's like, they think it's the greatest.
They've been there forever.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
That's cool. I've wondered about that because I know you think about in my family, I think about my mom.
Yes.
My mom's still with us, and she lives alone, and you wonder what happens if there's a situation.
Exactly.
So, is this the sort of thing that we should be thinking about sooner rather than later? I mean, you really don't like to think about it unless and until you need it, but isn't that kind of like not smart?
Well, I think that every family situation is different, and every elder, has different wants and needs. And, I think that if you really want to stay in your home, you should really stay in your home. If you can afford to do it and you're comfortable there, that's great. And you can bring in help, as it's needed. But I think that assisted living is something that families really ought to consider because, I don't want to be doing my own laundry and preparing all my meals when I'm 80 or 90. Mm-hmm. I think that assisted living is not only a great place to kind of take the heavy lifting work off the senior's plate, but also it can provide a really wonderful social environment where, people, if they're living in the home that they've lived for 30 years and maybe their spouse has died, they're very isolated and it can be very lonely.
That's a good point because you can just sort of get to a position where you're not going out or you don't have any social interaction.
Right.
That can really be a very negative thing and create a downward spiral, I'm sure.
It can, because a lot of the time seniors, when they're living alone, they might be afraid to go out or afraid of a fall or, whatever they might be afraid of. And it does, they isolate themselves in many cases.
Got it. Now, you've actually created a business out of helping people find this, which is very interesting to me because that implies that there's a lot of possibilities, lots of choices, and it's not as simple as saying, oh, let's just go over here. I mean,
that's exactly right. That's exactly right. So the things that are really important is you have to really take a look at the care needs. If somebody's independent, they could go into an independent living facility where there's assistance available if and when they need it, but they can live independently in a community where they've got that social interaction and they have their own little apartment and they can take their meals, in groups with other people that they like. So they can start there, and then as they need more assistance, they can, get help with whatever they need. It's kind of a pay-as-you-go kind of way. And then, for people who are more elderly and maybe don't walk very well, board and care can be a great option for them, because those are really more residential homes as opposed to the big centers where, it's 6 residents and there's 24-hour care, so somebody's always there looking after them.
So board and care, is that like a home, or a house where
It's like a house, yeah. And a lot of the times you wouldn't even really know, just looking at it from the street, that it was any kind of a care facility at all. They try to keep it pretty, neighborhood looking from the front, and then they might have ramps in the back for wheelchairs and things like that. They'll have grab bars in the bathroom. They'll have a shower chair in the shower so that people can be seated while they're getting cleaned up. So there's a lot of different things that they can do to make it more senior friendly and make it safer for the people that are residents.
Very cool. Now, how many there's a lot of this here? We're in Silicon Valley.
Correct.
Okay. And so, you don't drive down the street and see assisted living center signs on the freeway and stuff like that.
Right.
So how many different types of facility are there here? I mean, number-wise and style-wise.
Yeah, there are about 365 facilities in Santa Clara Valley alone.
365 in Santa Clara Valley.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so that is comprised of a lot of the smaller board and cares and then the assisted living centers. And really there's something for everyone. There's every different kind of price range. There are, private rooms. Some of them are very lush and beautiful. Some of them are a little bit more basic, and, really every price point you can think of.
So how do you go about deciding what's the right thing to do?
Right. Well, one of the things that I think is really important that, other agencies may or may not do is I make sure that I really meet with the family and I meet with the elder and make my own assessment of what the person can and cannot do and what's really going to be the right type of facility. I work with people who are even under the age of 60 who, every situation is different, but a lot of the times, you've got somebody who's on the younger side and they might want to go into independent living and, kind of have some of the things taken care of for them. Then I work with people who are coming out of skilled nursing who have had, for example, a heart attack, a stroke, a fall, and we really look at board and care for them because they really need more individualized attention. They're less independent.
So they're in a recuperative type of a phase in that type of a situation. And hopefully they can go back to their homes if they choose to.
Exactly. I mean, that's the thing that is kind of a misconception about board and care is people think, my family's putting me here and I'm going to stay here until I die.
Right. The
That's
old
really,
concept, they're tending to the home.
Right, exactly. And it doesn't have to be the case. I mean, physical therapy is available. A lot of the times they'll send a physical therapist from the skilled nursing facility and you can have that therapy while you're at board and care. And then as you recuperate and get stronger, you can go home and rejoin your spouse or your family or continue to live independently if that's what you were doing before.
So there's a massive change from what it was that, the old discussions in the shows and whatever that you used to see when I was growing up about what it was like for an older person if they were put into some type of a
It wasn't
thing.
Pretty. It was very stressful just to think about that.
Yeah, and I think that here in our culture anyway, in the Western culture, especially in the United States, we tend to be a dispersed family type of a situation.
Right.
And as opposed to your multi-generations living in the same community or within reasonable proximity to each other.
Right.
Like my situation, my mom's in Seattle. Okay, I'm down here. I have a brother in Spokane. I have a sister in Bellevue, so she's close, So it's just like, you're spread out all over the place.
Right.
So it's not quite like everybody's close and you can take care of either the real young or the very old.
Right. And I think that, when that does exist, it's an ideal situation. But as you said, I mean, the culture that we live in today, everybody's kind of dispersed across the nation. And so you may not live in the same city or even nearby your parents at all.
Right. Okay, so you get to a situation where it is important, something happens.
Right.
And you need to do something. And So they can call on you.
Correct.
Right? Because your company's called Ask Barbara?
That's right.
Okay.
It's called Ask Barbara.
Ask Barbara, and when they can come and ask you, what do I have to, what do I do? What can I do? And so when you look at this type of, these kinds of services and things like that, how are they paid for? Is it is the insurance type stuff cover it? Or to what degree, if at all, and that sort of thing?
Right. So assisted living is not covered by anything except for long-term care insurance. So Medicare will pay for certain days of hospitalization and skilled nursing, but boarding care and assisted living is outside of that.
So it's not really anything that your typical healthcare insurance is going to cover, is what you're saying?
Right. So it's really basically out of pocket, or if somebody's had the foresight to purchase long-term care insurance, that would cover it.
Let's talk about long-term care insurance. What exactly is long-term care insurance, and how do you go about finding it?
Well, you can go through any number of companies that will provide insurance, and they will, it's something that you should buy when you're young enough to get it.
Okay.
Because if you're already 70 or 80, you're not going to be able to qualify for it. So it's for people who are kind of baby boomer age now. If they want to plan for their future and make sure that they have plenty of money to cover their long-term care needs, that would be something that would be smart for them to look into now.
Got it. Okay. So, but if you don't have that, then the expenses that you incur have to come out of pocket.
That's correct.
Are these expenses reasonable, all things considered? I mean, I don't know how to determine whether it's reasonable. I suppose part of that has to do with what you're used to in terms of your social structure, strata and stuff like that.
So what I have done is I've been able to place very low-income clients for as little as $900 or $1,000 a month. Below that, there's really nothing for assisted living that exists. You can get kind of a low-income senior apartment for less, but there's really no assistance. So if you need the help, assisted living is what you should be looking for.
$1,000 a month, that's like an apartment. You pay more for that for an apartment in most cases.
Right, in most cases. And the thing about assisted living and board and care is it's pretty inclusive. So it's going to be, your room, your board, cleaning, help with showering, bathing.
Wow, so it's all inclusive.
It's all inclusive, and especially with board and care, what will happen is when you get out of skilled nursing, the person who runs the board and care will come and evaluate the elder and give kind of a final price based on the level of care. So obviously it would cost more if you couldn't dress yourself and couldn't, eat by yourself, versus if you were totally walking, ambulatory.
Right.
So it's kind of a individual evaluation on how much it would cost. But what I use as a rule of thumb is if you need some help and you wanted a private room in a nice house in a nice neighborhood, you should be looking at between $3,000 and $4,000 a month.
Okay.
So, you can do it for less, but, that's kind of the measurement that I use.
Well, I think it's important for people to understand what kind of order of magnitude that you've got out there in terms of cost, because it's, like we said at the beginning of the show, it's not the sort of thing that you think about ahead of time, that you kind of plan for.
Exactly.
Okay, and then all of a sudden, wham! Now you have to go out and make this decision, and it can be kind of overwhelming.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about how you help people through that process, but I want to remind the folks that if you have any questions about the topic that we're discussing right now, you can send in your queries to info@referencepointtv.com, and we'll make sure to get them to Barbara, and she'll be able to answer your questions and that sort of thing. So let's talk a little bit about how do you help a family through this kind of process. I mean, it's a highly emotionally charged time.
It is.
And so what do you have to do to try to help keep it calm and to get them through the thing?
Yeah. Well, I think that part of the reason that I'm able to be calm and help the families is because I've been through it myself. And I remember exactly how stressful it was at that time. And so I just try to kind of draw on that experience.
So now when you had to do that for your dad, where did you go for help? Did you have to do it all yourself and just sort of figure it out?
Well, we had gotten a list from the hospital of, different services that might be helpful. And my sister, who lived with my dad, kind of took the lead on that. And that was actually how I got introduced to this concept. We used a similar type of service up in the Walnut Creek area.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I just remember thinking at the time, what would we have done without this? This is the greatest service ever.
Yeah.
And so, when I decided to start this, I just thought, you know what, this is definitely the right thing for for me to do.
Oh, I can see how
Yeah.
it can be very fulfilling for you.
It's extremely fulfilling.
But I'm guessing, I mean, I haven't had the need, okay, personally, but I've been in situations where stuff blows up and you just, you know,
What do you do?
yeah, you don't know what to do. Having someone that can kind of point you in the right direction becomes a tremendous asset.
Right.
Okay, and you just bless those people because they're there. So again, let's get back to what do you do for a family? How do
Sure.
you help them through a process like this?
Sure. So what I do when I generally get the call is spend a lot of time really asking questions and really listening to the answers about what is important to the family, what is the health condition of the senior, how old are they, what is their name, what's most important to them, what would make them most happy, and really focusing on the medical condition, what brought them to the hospital, what brought them to skilled nursing, how much can they do, can they walk, how far, do they walk with a cane, with a walker, are they in a wheelchair, can they stand, can they transfer, which is basically from the bed to a wheelchair with the assistance of a walker or from one place to another. All those types of questions are very important to make sure that I'm making the right match.
Now, is the senior typically involved in that question and answer?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Most of the time I work with the adult children because especially with seniors that I'm getting from skilled nursing or from the hospital, they are generally pretty sick, and so they rely on their adult children to answer those questions.
They may not be in a condition to be able to think through those, especially if they're on some type of medication or something.
Right,
like
and
that.
I also work with the social workers, physical therapists, nurses, so that I'm getting as complete a picture as possible of what the health conditions are, what kind of medications the person's on, that kind of thing.
Okay, so you collect all this information that gives you a feel for the family,
Right.
for the senior.
Correct.
And then what?
The other two components, in addition to the care needs, are where does the family want to be? What part of the valley do they want to be in?
Oh, okay.
And then what's their monthly budget? So
Right.
what I have done is I have visited each of the facilities in the valley.
All 365 of them?
I don't think I've gotten to all of them yet, but I've gotten to most of them.
Wow.
And basically what I've done is I've taken very detailed notes on things that you need to look for, but it may not occur to the family to even ask those questions, such as what's the access from the bedroom that you're looking at to the nearest exit?
Oh.
What is the bathroom like? Is it wheelchair accessible? Is it a shower that you can roll the wheelchair into, or do you have to step over a low lip, or is it a bathtub where they have a shower chair and you can just kind of transfer and sit and then get cleaned up that way? So those kinds of things. Cleanliness, obviously, but also things like, do they have male caregivers? Sometimes if I have an elder who is a big person, they might need to have a little more muscle power.
Got it.
You know, I had a lovely client not too long ago. She was younger, and she'd had a hip replacement, so she was in a wheelchair most of the time, and she spent a lot of time on her computer. So you know what was most important to her? Wi-Fi.
Wi-Fi, yeah, okay. Sure, of course.
Yeah,
Of course,
because
and
it
if
really
you
helped
didn't
her
ask,
pass
you
the
wouldn't
time.
know. Yeah.
Exactly.
And then
so-
you have to go and visit the locations to determine whether they have that or not. That makes
Exactly.
a lot of sense. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so now you visited the you've done the research with the family, you visited the locations, and then you do what? You kind of try to marry up
Exactly.
a couple of 2 or 3 or 4 possibilities with that criteria,
Right.
and then you take them out to see the facilities. Is that
Right.
the
So what
idea?
I'll generally do is I'll create a long list of maybe 5 or 6 places. I'll talk over the different choices with the family, and based on what they hear and what they find important to them, I'll have them narrow it down to a top 3, and then we'll go see those top 3 together. So I'll drive them to the facilities
Got it. Okay.
and kind of point out while we're having the tour what kinds of things that they should look for, and then I'll have them rank them.
That's fabulous.
First choice, second choice, third
Now,
choice.
you were telling me you do all of this and you don't charge the family
That's
a
right.
nickel for doing that?
That's right.
Wow. Which
That's
is
right.
very cool.
Well, the business model is pretty cool because I don't charge the family, and it is free to the elder, it's free to their family. I get paid by the facility. So I don't charge the clients that I'm serving, and I'm getting paid by the people that I'm bringing business to.
Sure. Well, it's like this may be a strange analogy, but it's like in the travel industry. If you're booking a cruise for someone, you're not charging the person who's going cruising. You get paid by the cruise line. So
Very
it's
similar.
a similar kind of a thing.
Exactly.
Which is fantastic. I think that's a real important component to this arena, because when you're in this kind of challenging situation. I mean, one of the hardest things I would think would be to go to somebody and say, "Oh yeah, I can help you make that decision. You just got to give me $5,000 to start," or something like that. I mean,
Right.
We did a show here recently on this loan modification process, and there are people who are going looking for assistance, right? And that's what they're being told by some facilities. Oh, we can help you. You got to pay us up front. But there are plenty of places that you can go and you can get help without charge. And that's a similar kind of thing that you're doing here.
Right.
You are providing a service to a family in a crisis situation to help them through the crisis situation, and you're not, dipping into their pocket for it, which I think is fantastic.
Right.
All right. So, is it really? How do you decide whether it's better to bring a care provider into a home for the senior, or whether they should actually find an assisted living facility?
It's really up to the family. I think that each situation is unique. Another thing that does come into play, though, is cost. Because if somebody, let's say, had a stroke and was in the hospital, then they were in skilled nursing, and then they're trying to decide, okay, do I go into assisted living or do I go back home and I need 24-hour care? 24-hour care is a lot more money if you have it in your own home. So instead of $3,000 or $4,000, you're looking at $7,000 or $8,000. Significant difference. And, not everybody needs 24-hour care, and, in-home care is fantastic. I never try to convince somebody that they should want assisted living if what they really, really want is to be at home. I have a network of partners that I work with. So I have an organization that I work with that does home care. So if somebody says, I can't bear the thought of not coming back to my own home, that's where I really want to be, then I'll just refer the business over, and they'll get in-home care.
Got it.
Yeah.
So in bringing up a topic like this to the senior, is that, how do you do that? How challenging is this?
It can be very challenging depending on how strong-willed people are and how they, what they feel about it. What I say is bring it up early and often. If you think that, assisted living is something that you would like for your folks to look into, bring it up, let it drop, bring it up, let it drop. And then, maybe one day when mom is tired of scrubbing her own floors, she'll go, I really think we ought to look into assisted living. I had that idea.
Okay, so you allow them to make it their own,
Exactly.
which makes sense.
Empowerment is really important.
And it's, the way you described it, it's let's talk about the future type thing, what you think you might want to do with your life, as opposed to, Mom, Dad, I think you need to go, and which is, I think you'd get a lot of resistance on.
Yeah.
I guess it's all on how you position it, like almost anything else.
Yeah, and I think that also people of that generation who are in their 70s, 80s, and 90s now, when they think of assisted living, they think, oh, you want to put me in a home and I'm going to go to die there.
Right.
They haven't visited assisted living recently because it's like living at the spa. Some of the beautiful centers are just absolutely lovely. You get great care. There's all different kinds of fantastic activities. They provide transportation. You can go to your doctor's appointments. They've got movies and popcorn every night. I mean, it's really fun.
It can be cool. Okay,
Yeah,
good.
crafts,
which
you
is
name it.
great. I mean, it's like you're moving into a community.
Exactly.
You're not going to some cell somewhere.
Exactly.
It's in Alcatraz, right?
That's right. But I mean, it's just such a wonderful environment. The food's good, and it's such a great social interaction for people. I find especially women, we're all living longer now, but I see a lot of women who've outlived their husbands, and they've outlived most or all of their girlfriends too, and they're just lonely.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you remember when we were kids, and a new kid would move to class, and it was like, oh, who's the new girl?
Yeah. Oh,
that's exactly what it's like.
Yeah.
They're very eager to meet new people and make new friends.
Yeah, and it's not like they're not vibrant and all that sort of stuff.
Absolutely.
I mean, we have a strange perception, I think, that we're still disabusing ourselves of what it means just to age. I mean, the body does have some things that occur to it as it gets older.
Right.
But that doesn't mean you're not still as sharp as a tack.
Exactly. I think that we age physically a lot more than we age mentally.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
Good point. Well, very cool. Well, we've got just a few minutes left in the show, so I wanted to just kind of turn it over to you. What have we missed? What should we talk about? What do people need to understand about two things? One, assisted living for the seniors in general, and 2, about the kind of service that you perform to help them through this?
I think that, what I would encourage families to do is if they're curious about assisted living, don't go and look at a bunch of places on your own. Just call me. I can give you kind of the 10,000 foot level of, here's the personality of each of the places, especially, if somebody has a specific health issue, like for example, if somebody's a diabetic and they can no longer do their own injections, there's only a few places within our area that can handle them. So, I know the finer points of what the places are about.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing that you just mentioned. There are some nuances. You may not think of all the little things that you have to think about in order to be able to make the truly informed decision.
Right.
And if they go through the process with some help from you, for instance, then they're in a better position to say, here are the 2 or 3 things that really meet the primary criteria. I imagine when you go through that question and answer, that you end up with a set of, here's a primary criteria and here's some secondary criteria, and then we can kind of mix and match these, but these we got to have.
Exactly. And it just saves the family so much time to work with me, because there's no downside. It's kind of all upside.
Yeah.
I know the places. I'm not charging them anything, so it's easy for them.
And I imagine it eases the pain too,
Yeah.
to have some, and the fact that you've been there,
Absolutely.
I think has got to be a real asset to the discussion too.
Well, if you're the only child, you feel like you're making this huge, enormous
sure.
decision all by yourself, and you don't have anybody to really bounce ideas off of or ask questions of.
Right.
And then if you're a sibling, everybody feels like they know what's best for mom and dad.
That's
and so
right.
there's
So you get
generally
that.
some
it's never, no
disagreement.
matter which way you go, it's not easy.
Exactly.
I guess.
Exactly.
Well, Barbara, I want to thank you for coming and joining me here on Reference Point tonight. This is, I think, a very useful and important conversation. I think what you're doing is fabulous.
Thank you.
I thank you for doing it. Your business is in Los Gatos. Your company's called Ask Barbara. You can find her if you need to.
Yeah.
And
can I give my web address?
And I can't let you do that, but I can tell the folks, send me an email. If you want to know anything about what Barbara does, send an email to info@referencepointtv.com. We will make sure that this information gets out to the public.
That sounds perfect.
So I really want to thank you for joining us today. And ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you next time on Reference Point.